I'm coming back. Out, breathe, little Fluffenhammer. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that plays his games upon a stage. Roll those dice, and you are heard no more.
Oh, hi everybody, and welcome to the Fluffenhammer once more. As always, I am Adam, and with me today is my illustrious companion through the worlds of Warhammer. It's George.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. And again, Adam slightly caught me off guard with the opening there because he went slightly Shakespearean at that point. And I have recently one of my resurrected interests has been poetry and literature, and I've been reading a bit of Shakespeare, so that sort of caught me off guard there.
I'm inside your mind.
It was a slightly weird confluence of different interests all converging together and becoming slightly strange.
I'm glad to have delivered for you this morning that I have brought to you a little bit of confusion, for as we all know, I have become the herald of Zench, and I sow the architects of confusion's plans far and wide, and now you must reap the confusing whirlwind.
Of course, I mean, it does become a bother, though, doesn't it, with all the tentacles and the extra eyes and whatnot. They chafe, don't they? You know, when you get an eye on your knee or something. Buying trousers in that instance is just a nightmare.
Well, the problem I've got is you can't buy socks in one normal-sized and one birdfoot-sized. And, you know, it's my hoofs are getting rather cold.
Yeah, this is a problem, ladies and gentlemen, that the servants of the dark gods face constantly, but which is never explored in the fiction. It's the chafing of the armor. It's buying clothes when you have all sorts of weird mutations and whatnot. Because, you know, I don't know about the AOS realms. Maybe some of them do stock, clothing for the inveterate Zeech worshipper that has multiple limbs and various heads and eyes in the back of their neck or whatever. But the vast majority of stores don't, and the stores in the Imperium of Man certainly do not. I can tell you that for now.
Did you play around with the Age of Sigmar city creator?
I haven't had a chance to yet, but I would love to. It's a brilliant concept.
So I'm going to have to do this now. So Moleskine is going to be my city, and it's going to be the city of clothes. Where any person, because they are going to be completely and utterly away from the wars, so anybody can come to them as long as they come through the correct entrance. So there's no fighting going on. And no matter whose god you follow or what side you are on, you can come to Moleskine to be clothed. And I shall have my master tailor, who will have a giant pair of scissors, and he will be my army general. What else could you have? Fanatic sewers. So it's just these guys. They look like flagellants, but they all have needles and threads.
Oh, you know what? It would attract lots of elves, wouldn't it? Elves have got a real thing about the tailoring.
Oh, no, the old version of the Dark Elves, the Corsairs, and they're there with all of their goth clothing, and they're just wandering around.
They would be the equivalent of Hot Topic, wouldn't they?
They really would be. They would follow their lord, Hor Top Hair, but then I've just had this image of like a slan just on his giant chair.
Oh, good God. That's actually eroding my perception of the Dark Elves quite significantly. Fortunately, they don't really exist anymore, so that's all right.
But Master Clothhide, I do not have any money to get my clothes repaired. It's okay, little man. You will just have to owe me a favour.
Oh.
And thus, Moleskine.
So essentially, it's an entire city populated by Leland Gaunt from Needful Things, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah?
But instead of things that you want, it's just clothes being fixed.
Oh my God. That's actually, in all seriousness, you could get away with something like that in a serious bit of fiction if it were like a Zeichan city, where the commerce comes in manipulation, in favors asked for, where everybody owes everybody, and the highest ranking, the person who dominates, is the one who is the cleverest, the one who can weave the most threads around themselves.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. I could see that being an actual realm in AOS.
I could see it being a city. To be honest with you, I think my Zentian guys are now going to come from the city of Moleskine, where they've taken
Although, if you look
I'm so proud of that name.
It is good. But if you look at the disciples of Zeech and the Zeichan, the Arcanites, they don't wear very much because they're quite proud of their new forms that Zeech gives them, It was one of the bits of background in the disciples of Zeech that I absolutely loved. The fact that, you can be like ancient and elderly and decrepit or deformed, and once you pass through the rites that unveil you into a Zeech Arcanite cult, then you are gifted a new form, like an idealized form that you can then shroud. You can actually change or conceal through magic. I think that's really fantastic. I love that.
It is the thing that got me, and I mean, I've always, back in the old days, to take you down memory lane for a short time.
Adam's very good at this, ladies and gentlemen. Right?
But please take a seat by the fire, and Papa Nichols shall tell you some stories. So way back when, the only Chaos power that I ever really got behind was the Horned Rat. Khorne was a little bit too generic for my liking. Zench back then was probably the best of the four from my point of view, but still didn't do a huge amount to grab me.
Yeah.
Nurgle was Nurgle.
Yeah.
Slaanesh was Slaanesh. I always much preferred the idea of Chaos Undivided. That you could just completely sign away your free will and soul.
Really, back then, the Horned Rat was your only option, wasn't it? Or you could create your own,
Oh, yes. The aforementioned Mallet, the Chaos God of Banality.
I still want an entire... I mean, you know what? You could actually get away with fielding an unpainted army in that regard, couldn't you? This is how they roll. This is the uniform of Mallet. They don't have any gaudy colours or anything. It's just grey.
Yeah, just grey as far as the eye can see. So you haven't painted them? Oh no! I've spray painted them all Stormvermin grey.
Yeah, that's how they roll.
It makes no difference whatsoever to the colour of the plastic. But I had to put effort into it. What's to say? Oh, yeah. So, yeah, the Chaos Undivided was the type of thing that I enjoyed. The Horned Rat being my personal favourite, just because I love Skaven to bits. Yep. Since coming back in with AOS, Zench has far and above stood above every other Chaos power for me. And it's purely down to that Disciples of Zench book. Everything in there grabs me in ways, and it leaves little notes for you to start thinking about how you want to do stuff. For example, my Zench army, as the Acolytes slowly get turned into the Zangors. So I've got a lot of miniatures of like the little Zangor kits being in the Acolytes. So there's like a beast arm, or one guy's got a beast head, but it's all flesh colours.
It's almost like they're transitioning or evolving.
Exactly. Yeah? So my Chaos Lord for it is a heavily armoured Zangor with a massive, massive weapon, which I'm so glad that I found a sword this big, because it looks ridiculous. I love it. So it kind of really fires up the imagination for me in a way that's never happened in old Warhammer. Once happened. The
book is probably one of the best that's been released in AOS, to be perfectly honest, in terms of its sheer readability. It reads like one of the old-fashioned Realms of Chaos books. It's got that feeling about it, but it's more coherent and simpler to use, and has all of the wonderful coloured artwork. And the best thing about it is you can tailor it to pretty much any kind of Zeech force you can think of. You were just talking about your force, which is one where the Arcanites are slowly evolving into bestial forms. They're becoming Zangor. Well, there are ways of doing that in the army list, because there are various spells and effects that actually do turn characters into Zangor, which is just wonderful. Just wonderful.
I still need to get some demons for my Zench. But at the moment, I'm loving the idea of just having the acolytes. And now that I finally, after 8 months, painted my Ogroid Thermitage, which is... I never want to paint another one of those again in my life.
Really? Is it a difficult one to paint?
It is. It's mind-bogglingly difficult. If you look at all the back of him, there's all these little grooves.
Oh, like the arcane markings that are sort of swarming over his skin.
And the amount of times I've taken this mini and I've stripped it back down and had another go, stripped it back down, had another go, to the point where I was starting to think, I'm going to have to just buy a new one here because this is going to just get ruined. And I got it to a point where I just went, it's done. It's done. And I've never in my lifetime had a mini that has caused me this much pain and agony. And I was thinking about it the other day. I went, hang on. No, that's about right, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a Zenchian powerhouse of a creature. So it's there just to drive me up the goddamn
Exactly.
wall.
Maybe that was the express intention. Maybe that's the inspiration behind it. It's designed to evoke a state of madness. And that's the point at which you can paint it.
Yes, and that's also why I found it very easy now to hold it up with all my extra tentacles.
Yeah.
It made all these tentacles, plus the Citadel painting stand.
Which is a lovely thing, I must say. That's a clever idea.
I actually really like it.
I do
it's
too.
Really good.
I really like it. I mean, it saves like saving corks from wine bottles and, sort of like sticking miniatures into the top of it with wire or blue tack or something and using that as a temporary stand.
Yeah, it's a great little kit. And to be honest with you, anybody who complains about it, it's a $5.
It's not like the usual. It's not a rip-off or anything like that. It's not too expensive, and it's actually a very versatile little bit of work. You can actually adapt it to various sizes of miniature to hold, which is really, really cool. It's very good for converting as well. If you like to sculpt details on your miniatures, which I do. It's very stable for that. It provides a really nice stable base that you can sort of move around without having to sort of hold the miniature in various awkward ways.
Which is a lovely thing.
Yep.
I had a go at it in Manchester last weekend. Which, by the way, I need to talk about the Manchester Games Workshop store, but I'll come back to that in a second.
Okay.
And I had to go with it, and yeah, it is really cool. I like it a lot. I like it so much, I'm actually going to go into town later on today, and I'm going to buy one.
Cool. I mean, I ordered one out of curiosity to see if it was actually a worthwhile thing, because, I mean, there are a lot of hobby products that can be quite redundant. You don't necessarily need them. You just have them in the off chance that you might perhaps someday get some use out of them, and probably never will. I mean, if you're pushed for it, most kitchens have actually got stuff that you can adapt to use in sculpting or modelling or whatever if you're pushed. But this is a really cool piece of kit. I have to say, I really, really like it.
The thing I like about it most is that adjustable base is so good that it fits things that aren't Games Workshop as well.
Yeah, that's also very cool.
And it's like, because I've been looking at some War Machine or something down the line.
I'm sure there are lots of people listening now who are shrieking heresy.
Maybe you are.
Shrieking heresy.
What if I told you I was thinking about getting some Malefax as well?
Yeah.
And
you're going to get us actually hunted down and assassinated or burnt at the stake or whatever it is the Inquisition does to people.
And to make it even worse, I ordered Frostgrave yesterday. Yeah, I did.
Mind you, I must admit, I've been indulging in some of my other tabletop hobbies as well. Not other war game franchises as such, but I've been indulging my D&D.
Oh, yeah.
Recently, yeah. There's so many. I didn't realize. I thought I had all of the new books, the new products from Wizards of the Coast, but there's actually loads of stuff out there at the moment. It's a very good time to be getting into it. A very good time to be getting into it. There are hundreds of new campaigns, which are actually adaptations of old campaigns. Like the Curse of Strahd, which takes you into Castle Ravenloft, which is sort of like the gothic horror element of the D&D world. If you want your games to have have a slightly more sort of Hammer horror feeling about them, that's the setting that you use. It's vampires and werewolves and zombies and, little towns where they hang garlic over the entrances of their inns and that kind of thing.
Yeah. The thing that really interests me at the moment is that there's rumours kicking around that there's going to be a Age of Sigmar version of the Warhammer role-playing game coming out.
So I understand. And there's also been rumblings of the 40k equivalent too, hasn't there?
There has been indeed. And these things are going to be... what I'm really hoping for is that we're going to see a new version of The Enemy Within. Because that, if anybody has ever seen The Enemy Within, it was a Warhammer fantasy roleplay expansion stroke campaign stroke 3 years of content that never ever ended, and it was massive and it was brilliant.
Yeah, it was all about cults, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
It was all about sort of like, it's still a thing, actually. They could very easily adapt that to AOS, very easily.
Oh, yeah.
But it was about the hidden cults that festered within the old world, essentially. The not necessarily always chaos cults either, although most of them were. The vast majority of them were. There were lots of different cults back then, just as there are in the 40k setting. You've got your Gene Stealer cults, you've got your alien worshipping cults, you've got your chaos cults, obviously, but you've also got like lots of revolutionary movements who hate the Imperium. You've got intellectual and academic and artistic movements that despise the oppression of it all. It was that kind of thing.
My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. We have a third person joining us today. That person is Gimli the cat.
Right.
He has managed to sneak into the room that I record into. I don't know how he did it, and he is currently trying to push over everything. So any noises that you hear in the background, it is just Gimli deciding that he wants attention. So my apologies for that.
I thought we were going to have a surprise guest, actually, there for a moment. I was sort of like, ooh, I was quite excited.
Yes, and unfortunately it's less a surprise guest and more a small, furry, ballistic weapon.
Something that maybe like the orcs or goblins would use.
Why didn't I call him Squig?
That's actually, if you do get another cat, Squig would be a fabulous name. Snotling.
Right. Oh, Snotling would have been... Gimli, your name is now Snotling. Here, Snotling. You looked up?
There you go.
There we go. His name is now Snotling.
But no, I mean, it is a weird thing that they... I mean, I was actually taken by surprise that they focused on Tzeentch so much in both the game
really
systems,
did.
because he is definitely one of the powers that has been the most consistently neglected.
Yes.
Throughout the course, really. I mean, back in the the Realms of Chaos days, they were all pretty evenly spaced. With Khorne maybe overshadowing the rest, had the most miniatures, definitely. But Tzeentch, I mean, it really was Khorne and Nurgle for the longest time. For the longest time, they were the powers that got all the miniatures, they got all the background, they got all the attention. But then suddenly you had this explosion in, was it late last year or late the year before?
Late last year,
where you had...
Well, no, it was early this year, because it was January, wasn't it? January.
Oh, well, because you also had the year, I think it was the November previously, you had the War on Fenris in 40k.
That's true.
So you had like the Thousand Sons getting their shot in the arm, which they desperately needed, with the return of Magnus and the new miniatures, the Scarab Occult, the new miniature for Ahriman, and all that stuff. The Zarngor, obviously. And on the AOS side, you had the Disciples of Tzeentch, and suddenly all these new miniatures and all this whole new dynamic for the god, this whole new dynamic where they move his forces very significantly away from what Chaos used to be classically. I mean, classically, what you've had, certainly in Fantasy Battle and AOS, is a polyglot force. So it's been the rampaging marauders from the north. It's always been a core of chaos warriors and beastmen and demons and spawn, with some odd elements bolted on, like minotaurs and stuff like that, but they've all been pretty much the same dynamic. They've always been a close combat army primarily, small units, very elite, but now they've changed it completely. for Zeech, he plays like almost the opposite of a classic Chaos Force. And I love that.
He's got
love it.
more in general with something like the Gene Sealer cults nowadays than he does with anything.
Absolutely. And also,
Chaos used to be.
It's not only like a horde Chaos army, which it is, because you've got the Arcanites who are all massive blobs of infantry, the Zarngor who are massive herds of infantry. You've also got a fantastic long-range army, because every miniature in the entire army has a long-range attack. Every single one of them does.
That alone is a thing that I'd never thought I'd ever see. The idea of the Beastmen for Zench has been pushed to its absolute limit.
It really has.
And it works.
They're the most distinct now. They're the most distinct Beastmen, without a shadow of a doubt. I love the fact they've given them avian influences. You know, to fit in with Zeech demons, obviously. I love the fact that they're more elaborate now than they used to be. You know, the horns of the Skyfires in particular have got like these elaborate crowns of horns which show their status, obviously. It's just gorgeous. It's gorgeous stuff.
It is. The thing that gets me the most about them is that I've got this love of the Tengu legend and the Tengu mythology. So when Zench started getting interesting and started going all, this is very much cult heavy, and it's the insidious taking down of governments from within. That's something that really sings to me. It's the Lovecraft Innsmouth influence that always grabs me. I've got a thing for cults in fiction. And then you add on top of that, and here's some things that look like Tengu. Well, it's just like you just opened up a hole in my brain and had a quick look in.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, my only hope now is, I know we're getting like a Get You By Thousand Suns list in the chapter approved that's coming up. Yes. What I hope when they come around to releasing the book, and we know they're doing it because we've seen a picture of the actual book, where, like very early on, when they were talking, before any of the codices came out, there was a picture of the Thousand Suns Codex that will be released eventually. My only hope is that they bulk them out a little bit, that they give them something like the Disc Riders, or, I would love to see, actually, a unit of Thousand Suns, like maybe aspiring sorcerers riding Discs of Zeech.
That would be awesome, actually.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I would absolutely love to see that. It would give them a little bit of... one of the things they suffer from is a lack of fast-moving units. So that would be wonderful to balance it out a little bit.
Do you really want 1,000 Suns to be fast-moving at all? Because it kind of removes the...
It's a fair point, actually.
Slow, shambling...
It is a fair point, but they do exist, though. That's the thing. They do exist in the background. If you look at the old Horus... the old Horus Heresy art books?
Yeah.
There's artwork and accounts of Zeech disc-riding sorcerers, like units of them. So they do fit, as long as they're not, like, overwhelming, as long as they're, like, a limited... there's a limited number of them. I think it should be okay. It depends on how they implement them, I suppose. Just on how they function in the game.
Well, it's the same with anything, isn't it? It's how it gets implemented, how it gets put together. There is something I really do want to talk about in this episode. You may notice, ladies and gentlemen, that things have gone a bit more free-form since we've kind of swapped things around. We're going to do a little bit of a bit of housework at the end of the show to explain a few things, but we'll get to that later. This past weekend anyhow, I was in Manchester, and as I like to do when I go to different cities and whatnot, I like to pop into a local games workshop just to see what it's like. So I went to the Arndale Games Workshop in Manchester. I was absolutely blown away by this store.
Yeah?
Oh yeah. So you're walking up towards it, and the first thing I saw was a cityscape that had been built into the window.
Uh-huh.
And I do mean built into the window.
Oh, right.
It starts off at the very front of the window. There is a small army of Caradron overlords on a coastline with a great big green river going through it. And then building up from that point up into the wall was what can only be described as the city of Castle Grayskull. This giant mountain fortress that had been built into the wall. It was almost like they just took a load of rocks and then built around it to build this big city. And it has effects like missiles firing out the side of it into the Caradron Overlord army. There's little stories going on. It's just all Skaven up and down. There's a vermin lord at one point, and he seems to be chasing this unarmored dwarf down the stairs. There's some Skaven with war machines, and one of the Skavens lying on his back with a big bit of shrapnel sticking out of him. Yes, the thing's exploded.
Yeah, something's gone wrong there, clearly.
Oh yeah, and I must have spent 15 minutes just gazing at it. It is a thing of absolute beauty. So then I turn around to enter the store, and then I see the 40k Imperiator Titan.
Oh, good God. That must be huge.
It's bigger than me.
Yeah, I was going to say that must take up a sizable amount of the store, presumably.
It's in the other window. It's it's about 9 foot. It is gigantic.
I can't even get the scale of that. I can't imagine how you would even begin constructing it, to be perfectly honest.
I think they just wrapped somebody in paper mache and then just kept building
on
top.
Yeah, took a mold of a human being and then built on top of it. Yeah,
it is absolutely gigantic.
God, how would you even implement that? Jesus God, that would have to be like a. It would have to be like a fortress. You couldn't play it like a Titan. It's just insane. Just insane. I mean, for the people who don't know, an Imperator Titan, ladies and gentlemen, is it's like the biggest Titan in existence. It's the biggest scale of Titan in existence. It's a semi-robotic war machine that's actually like a giant moving temple. Each of its legs is a bastion. On its back, it's got a city just bristling with spires and guns, and each of its arms is a gun capable of annihilating an army.
The best way to describe it is, it's if Birmingham stood up.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. If Birmingham was slightly prettier.
Well, yeah, if Birmingham was more... All right, if York stood up. Does that work better for you?
That works a little bit better, yeah. I would say it's a bit more if Prague stood up.
Yeah,
okay, with the spires and everything. That's kind of what it looks like. If Prague had big legs and stood up, yeah.
So there I am, thinking, good grief, the guys in this store have got some real talent. So I enter the store. The first thing I see, as my eyes are grabbed, is a table, and it's a Age of Sigmar table. So it's got the all the bits that you'd imagine. It's got the way gates, and all those things. And then I noticed that hanging from the ceiling, they have floating islands above it. That have waygates on them.
Oh man!
So the idea is that if there's some kind of scenario that you have to go and collect something, you go through the waygates onto the floating islands.
Like 4-dimensional wargaming.
Yeah,
this is ace. That's brilliant.
That blew my mind. Okay.
Oh.
Then I saw the Christmas tree. The Christmas tree is a load of, it's almost like tinsel, like hard tinsel that's been spray painted green, and it's been put into the shape of a demon prince. And it stands on the table, and it's roughly about 6 foot tall.
That's brilliant.
It's almost like Magnus, if Magnus was a Christmas tree. It is.
I'm sure in one of his various incarnations, or sort of, his aspects, he probably is.
Mm-hmm. That's not the best thing, though. And the best thing, weirdly enough, is the thing that I wouldn't have ever classified as being the best thing in the Games Workshop, because it's the Games Workshop game that I can't stand.
Yeah.
They had a Lord of the Rings table.
Yes.
And if I said to you that there was a ladder next to the table, so you could move Saruman...
Oh, man.
You kind of get the idea what I'm talking about.
It wasn't Orthanc, was it?
It was indeed.
They'd made Isengard, had they?
They had made an in-scale.
Oh, for frig's sake.
In-scale.
Brilliance.
Isengard.
I'm not interested in that game either, but as the settings of Middle-earth go, Isengard is one of my favourites, and that would probably be one of the games I would actually be interested in playing, with the Ents and Saruman up in his tower and whatnot, raining fireballs down on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliance.
Yeah, so whilst in there, I got to talking to the guys who make these things, and they're fantastic. Mm-hmm. Some of the best stuff I've ever seen in a Games Workshop. And that's not to say that other stuff in Games Workshop aren't great. It's just these guys were just above.
Yeah.
They were so good.
Went above and beyond, yeah.
Oh, yeah. They were really happy to talk about how they built these things and how they made them and, all the sort of ideas that they'd had over the years. And they were brilliant.
Genuine hobbyists, yeah?
Yeah. And then one of them let slip something.
Oh.
Which was an interesting one. 1 second, sorry. Now, maybe I shouldn't mention this, but I'm going to. Purely because it got my interest. Because it's something that we already kind of know, but with something new attached to it.
Okay.
So you said, well, yeah, with the new scale of Epic, I've been trying to build some scenery. Wait a second.
Yeah.
What do you mean, new scale of Epic? And he went, yeah. The new Titus Mechanicus, when that comes out. There's a new Titus Mechanicus, right? I knew that there was a new Epic being discussed. I didn't know it was on its way. Yeah, they've changed the scale. They've upped the scale a bit.
Right, okay.
All right, to what? Well, the Imperator is around about the size of a Warhound.
Yeah, they have upped the scale a bit, haven't they?
That's not upping the scale a little bit. Then I started thinking about it. Oh, God. The tanks.
Yeah.
Those tanks are going to look great.
Uh-huh. Demon engines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He went, I think the land trains are probably going to look really good. I went, what? Hang on, what? Wait, back it up. He went, no, I don't know there's land trains coming. I'm hoping that the old squat land trains are going to turn up.
Oh.
But are you now backing away from me? Are you now just...
Yeah, did he...
What do you know?
Yeah, did he maybe let slip... Was that slightly Freudian there? Did he let something slip that shouldn't?
I don't know, because the Games Workshop staff themselves don't know a huge amount until they get
usually,
notice.
If you hear like a rumour that's got like I heard from a Games Workshop member of stuff, then usually you have to treat it with a grain of salt. But that does sound that ties up with a lot.
It does.
It dovetails with a lot of what we've already been told from rumour mongers and whatnot. We know there's been talks of the Adeptus. Is it the Titanicus?
Yeah, Adeptus Titanicus.
Whatever. The new game coming out, there's been talk of that for a while. I imagine then, from what you've been saying, they may use it as a test bed to see whether there's enough enthusiasm for relaunching Epic. Mm-hmm. Which is awesome. I mean, again, for the people who don't know, because there may be people listening who don't even know what Epic is, because it's been gone for so long. Epic was it's been a system that's been around for a really long time. Really, really long time. Like from the earliest days of 40k, there's been an Epic system. And it's just smaller scale. It's smaller scale miniatures for 40k, but with bigger scale battles. So what they did back in the day was that they would tie together narrative campaigns. So you would start maybe with a skirmish game of Warhammer 40,000 to represent the early battles, and then you would progress to Epic as the war escalated, because you could fight with these enormous war engines. You could actually fight apocalyptic scale battles. So imagine 40k Apocalypse as it was, but bigger, and with bigger war machines and with just smaller scale miniatures.
The great thing about it was that it really pushed the 40k universe in the ways that Rogue Trader hadn't. You kind of got the idea of all the different things working with each other to build these machines, to get these giant armies into position.
Well, one of the things that characterized the early days of Epic, which is called Space Marine back then, Epic was just sort of like it was really weird.
Well, no, actually no. Space Marine was the second
version.
Space Marine
was the second version. The first one was
Adeptus Titanicus.
It
was just Titans and tanks.
It was just, there was no infantry, was there? Space Marine was the second version, which introduced things like the little blocks of infantry miniatures, and you could buy entire armies in this tiny little box for $5, basically. It was also like a money saving device as well, because you could actually buy and paint entire armies in one box quite easily, and they'd be way bigger than anything you could get in 40k back then, way bigger. But what really characterized Space Marine in particular was that everything worked in tandem. You had this,
Yeah.
it wasn't like in 40k, a lot of the individual units, particularly in second ed, stood on their own. There wasn't much synergy between them. But in Epic, that wasn't the case. Everything relied on everything else, because it had this weird command structure where you would have... You would play the general of your army, essentially. So if you're playing a Chaos army, for example, you would be characterized on the field by either a Greater Demon or by a Demon Primarch. This was the first time you could play the Demon Primarchs, by the way, and the first time their backgrounds were really explored, and the first times they had miniatures. And you would give commands to your battalions. All of the miniatures were arranged into battalions that would move and function together on the battlefield and would operate with reference to these command counters that you would give them, whether it was to their benefit or not. So you actually had to really think about how you worked back then, about tactics and strategy. And also you had this thing whereby everything was really tied to the commanders of the armies. So if your commanders died, your armies would fall apart. Like, just disintegrate around you, particularly Chaos. Chaos was totally tied to its Greater Demons and Demon Primarchs. Once they were on the table, then your armies would gain all these incredible buffs. Just enormous amounts of buffs. But once they were all gone, the Chaos army just disintegrated to bits. Demons would disperse into the ether, beastmen and cultists would run away, Chaos Space Marines would falter.
And then, of course, the beauty of it was that when they added in a much later edition, actually, I think it was the third redo of it or something that, they added the Tyranids into it.
Oh, God.
And they were monstrous.
They exploded. I mean, that was when the Tyranids were really going through this renaissance period. The Tyranids had been really neglected up till that point. They'd been mentioned as the Hive Fleets. I don't even think they were called Tyranids at that point. They were called, much before then. They were the Hive Fleets, weren't they?
They were Tyranids at that point because the original version of them, which came out in White Dwarf, was
right. Yes,
a very strange list. But the one I'm thinking about is when they brought out the full-blown Tyranid
Yes,
list.
I remember. Yeah, for Epic. Yeah.
Yeah,
and you had things like the Dominatrix and the Haruspex and what they did was that they showed you the full monstrosity of the Tyranids, because they could, instead of they can't have war machines per se, so they showed you how the Tyranids have evolved to develop bio-titans and biological war machines.
Name.
Yeah, the Haruspex and the Hierophant. Beautiful miniatures too. They were actually really quite distressing looking. They looked like big spidery crab things with tendrils and like biological cannons coming out of their backs, and they're beautiful miniatures. What's interesting is that in turn has inspired how the Tyranids later manifested in 40k, because a lot of the aesthetics of those big monsters became standardized, and they actually moved the aesthetic of the Tyranids in 40k away from what they originally were. Because if you look at like the original second ed Tyranid range, they're a far cry from what they are now. They look almost like a different army, because they're much more humanoid. For one thing, they've got many more human aspects to them. The original range. I mean, now, don't get me wrong, I love the original range. I think they're really cool, and I remember loving like that original Hive Tyrant. It's a big metal miniature that's got like the skull face on it. I love that miniature, and the Lictor that's sort of rearing back and it's got the flesh hooks exploding out of its chest cavities. I love those miniatures. I absolutely adore them. But they were more sort of their time. They weren't quite as characterized as a whole as they later became. But part of what inspired the sort of the later renaissance of the Tyranids, which came about in sort of around 4th ed, didn't it? Sort of latter 3rd ed, early 4th ed, was the Epic miniatures, because the Epic miniatures were much more alien.
Yes, they were.
They were much. I mean, things like the Haruspex and the Exocrine, which you can now find in 40k. Both of those have got 40k miniatures and rules now.
They do, yeah.
They were so strange looking, so bizarre. They looked like sort of HR Giga designs, which makes sense, of course, because the Tyranids are obviously inspired by the Xenomorph. Very, very clearly inspired by the Xenomorph. They don't have like anatomy that you would expect of an earthbound creature.
No.
They don't seem to follow the same rules of evolution as you would expect them to, and that makes them very distressing, very disturbing indeed. And the fact it's the scale of them too.
So I know we've been going on about the Tyranids for a wee while here, but actually it's quite it's very much in what we're going to talk about a little bit here, because you, my friend, do actually have the latest Codex Tyranid, don't you?
I do, and it's I'm very sorry to the audience, and I know I say this almost every time we record one of these things, but these analyses of the codices can tend to be a little bit one note recently, simply because they're all so good, and it seems that this is what we spend our time doing. We rhapsodize about the codices, but there really is nothing else to do. To be honest, the Tyranids, like the Chaos Space Marines, are one of those armies that have they really were having difficulty back in the days of 6th and 7th Ed. They were one of those armies that were pretty heavily neglected in terms of the rules. In fact, the 6th Ed Codex, which they were using in 7th Ed, was just abysmal. It just didn't work. Just didn't work. It didn't fit somehow. It felt like a codex that was written for 5th Ed rather than for 6th and 7th Ed, and suffered immeasurably as a result of that, such that they had to update it. Do you remember?
Yes, I do.
They had to introduce the Shield of Baal campaign to the Siege of Baal campaign, rather, to update both them and the Blood Angels, because both of those codices were trash, basically. They were just no good back then. And even that didn't really help them a great deal. It introduced some nice new units in terms of like the Tyrannocyte and the big wonderful spore things that come down, that carry the Tyranids down to a planet. They introduced all that stuff, but even that wasn't really enough. The new codex, just like the Chaos Space Marine Codex, it looks like what they've done is gone back to the drawing board and looked at, right, okay, let's look at what people are complaining about, what doesn't work, what people want the Tyranids to be, and we'll work up from that baseline. Okay? And that's what they've done. And it works. I mean, one of the things I will say for the Tyranids is, unlike Chaos, they've always had an excellent miniatures range.
Yes.
The miniatures have, since 4th Ed, since they started to give them their own real identity, and started to think about how the sort of bizarrely evolutionary, the forced evolutionary nature of the Tyranids works on them aesthetically, and tying all of the different units together. So if you look at, say, for example, the Hive Tyrant, you will see its relationship to the Broodlord and to the Tervagon, and you'll see the Tervagon's relationship to the Haruspex and the Haruspex's relationship to the Tyrant Guard. They've all got certain common aspects where you can see how the base Tyranid bioform has been adapted to particular uses and has been emphasized to particular extremes. It's very, very, very clever. I really like that. But the rules have never really matched it. They've never been quite up to it. In the last couple of editions, they haven't been quite up to it. The new codex does away with all of that. It's a stunner. It's an absolute stunner. The Tyranids have become frightening again. I mean, this is something that I've missed in the Tyranids since 2nd Ed. In 2nd Ed, they had a very limited miniatures range and a very limited range of units, but they were frightening. They were massively frightening because they were the codex de jure when they came out. This was kind of the way 2nd Ed worked, essentially. They could have called it the Codex Creep edition of Warhammer 40,000 because every time a new codex came out, it was the best. That's just the way it worked. Every single time a new codex came out, it was the best. It happened with the Eldar, which was the second codex for 2nd Ed. It happened with the Chaos Space Marines when they came out, because they were just insane. And it happened with the Tyranids, which was one of the last codices released for 2nd Ed.
Was it?
They were
I suppose
nightmare.
it would be, yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was towards the latter end of 2nd Ed, and they were a nightmare. Back then, they were an absolute nightmare to face. They had the best of everything, really. They had all the best big monsters. They were a swarm army, so they could just, they could have thousands of units on the battlefield at once. They were psychically insane. They could out-psycho the Eldar just so easily. so easily because, of course, they're shadow in the warp nonsense.
Yeah.
Which-
You've reminded me there of an old White Dwarf battle report.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just as that army came out, they had them against the Imperial Guard.
Yeah.
And it was a massacre.
Yep.
And I remember it, and it's weird how I remember it, because I was talking to a guy at the local club that I went to, and he hated that battle report because he wanted to see battles of, two people playing each other and, it being a battle.
Yeah.
And he disliked it intensely because it was such a
So
rout.
one-sided.
Yeah. The Tyranids just absolutely destroyed everything they came across.
Yep. And that was just the standard.
Yeah.
You know how the Craft World Elder were in 7th Ed?
Yeah.
That's how the Tyranids were towards the latter days of 2nd Ed. You knew fighting them that you were on a losing streak, essentially. You were going to be on the back foot, especially if they took Screamer Killers.
Oh. And they're back. Screamer
They're
Killers are back.
Screamer Killers are back. Not only that, the best thing is there are loads of different Carnifexes. Mm-hmm. There are actually 3 different entries for Carnifexes in the book. There's the normal Carnifexes, which are the most adaptable. They're like the baseline Carnifex, and they're the most balanced.
Yeah.
So you can adapt them in so many different ways to do so many different things. You've got the Screamer Killers, who are assault specialists. Mm-hmm. You point them and let them go. You do nothing else with them. And they even the way they've arranged the miniature looks like the old Carnifex.
I saw that and I was so happy.
It functions like the old Carnifex. It's got the old bioplasmic scream attack. Mm-hmm. It's got the living battering ram rule. It rams into the enemy units and just sends them flying. It's brilliant, and it also has the old terrifying rule back as well. It's brilliant. They really did want to make that sort of like a little nice labour of love, a little reference to the Tyranid fans. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the Thornbacks, and the Thornbacks are kind of the opposite of the Screamer Killers. So they are the Carnifexes that sit back and shoot.
Okay.
They're sort of close to mid-range heavy weapons specialists. So they're more like disruptive Carnifexes than anything else. They've got the most in terms of the long-range options. Mm-hmm. So that's brilliant. You've got entire different types of Carnifexes, different species of Carnifex, which makes absolute sense for the Tyranids because they endlessly adapt and transform, depending on what they face.
Well, considering that in 7th, the Tyranids were the least adaptable, least mutable force out there, that makes me very happy to hear.
Absolutely. I mean, another thing they've done, because of course the Tyranids have also always had a problem whereby, how the Chaos Space Marines have their Chaos Cults and they have their Traitor Legions, the Imperial chapters, they have their chapters and their chapter traits, the Imperial Guard have their regiments, and so on and so forth. The Elder have their craft worlds. They've had these varieties implemented in terms of their rules. So how you paint your miniatures actually determines their special rules, how they play and how they function on the battlefield. The Tyranids have never really had that, which doesn't really make a great deal of sense because there have been entire different hive fleets that have come about over the different gaming systems. You've got Kraken and Leviathan and Behemoth, and they're all different. They all function differently in the background. They all attack differently from different vectors of the galaxy, and they've all adapted differently, but that's never been implemented. But it has now.
Yep, it has.
To sort of bring the Tyranids in line with the standardized format of the codices, whereby you have lots of different variations of the core army list depending on what hive fleet you want. There are now special rules for each different hive fleet that determine their characters and the way they play, and will also sort of force the army composition, because of course there are certain special rules that benefit certain units more than others. So that's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. It means that you can take a horde army and it will play differently from, say, a psychically heavy army, or you can take an army that's almost entirely made of monstrous constructs, Carnifexes and Morlocks and whatnot, and it will play differently from another Tyranid army. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And on top of that, you've also got like different warlord traits and so on and so forth. It's really cool. It's really, really cool. And it's just exactly what all of the other army lists have had. It's what all of the other army lists have had. It means that you can play pretty much how you want, and you can compose your force how you want. They call them Hive Fleet adaptations, which is really nice.
And the one that has really grabbed me, and it grabbed me hard, was Behemoth.
Behemoth, yes, hyper aggression.
Yeah, I mean
they're the close combat one. They're the close combat Hive Fleet. You can re-roll failed charge rolls for units with this adaptation. Yeah, it's pretty good. What you want is lots of fast-moving swarms. With that, so that's what you want.
As many Screamer Killers as you can physically get.
Screamer Killers, Gene Stealers, Gene Stealers with that. Yeah, horrible. Absolutely vile, because Gene Stealers are badass as it is.
Oh yeah, just the new Gene Stealer core rules have been updated beautifully.
They've made them monstrous.
Yeah.
They've made them what they should be, really. I mean, the whole thing about the Gene Stealers is they're supposed to be the Space Marine killers, aren't they?
Yes.
They're specifically adapted as shock troops. So they go in, they don't necessarily charge from the front lines, but they infiltrate.
Mm-hmm.
So they're already on the planet. They're already there on the battlefield when the Tyranids attack, and they erupt from under the ground or from like sewers or air vents and air ducts, and they just take the enemy apart. They disrupt the enemy lines, and that's what they do now. They are absolute nightmares. And also, they're very adaptable now as well. They've been given lots of different war gear options. So you can actually make different biomorphs of the Gene Stealers depending on what you want to do with them.
That's cool.
I mean, there was a weird instance not too long ago, like towards the latter days of 7th Ed, after the Gene Stealer Cult Codex came out, where you had different rules for Gene Stealers in the Gene Stealer cults than the Tyranids. And actually, the ones in the Gene Stealer cults were way better. Way better than the ones in the full-blown Tyranid fleet.
Yeah, but as I say, the 7th edition Tyranid army was a joke. It was unwinnable. It was the exact opposite of what they were in 2nd, where
it really was.
You couldn't physically win with them. There was just nothing to them.
They were in the same position as Chaos. They really were, where we were just in, like, you knew going into a game that you were likely going to lose. And you just had to either get over that or not play, unfortunately. And that's a very sad state of affairs. It's not the case anymore. Like all of the codices that have come out, they are frightening. They do, I can see how you could put together some real killer armies from this army list. But I'm not so frightened of them that I would be, like, reluctant to face them.
Well, no, it's like every other army. They are scary, but there's weaknesses built in.
Absolutely. I can see counters for these guys with my armies that I have now. My Severed Angels are in a very good position. Slanesh is in a very good position against these guys because, Noise Marines take away one of their major benefits, which is cover saves.
Mm-hmm.
The Tyranids rely on cover saves because, by and large, their armor sucks. Their armor is really bad because, of course, they don't have armor. They just have chitin and flesh, So that's one of the areas where they are quite weak, by and large. There are ways around it, and there are units that are exceptions to the rule. But by and large, most of your forces are going to have crap armor. And also going to be quite weak. They're going to be, like toughness 3 or 4 at best.
Yeah.
So that's what you take advantage of. And noise weaponry, like the sonic weaponry of the Noise Marines, ignores all cover benefits.
That's nasty. I like that.
So the Tyranids do not fare well against Slanesh armies at the moment. Also, Thousand Sons. What you do is, there was a time when the Thousand Sons actually suffered really badly against the Tyranids because they were small elite units and their weaponry was designed to kill Space Marines.
Yeah.
It was designed to punch through heavy armor. And the Tyranids do have heavy armor, but not much of it. They don't have a great deal of it. So you are wasting your primary benefit, essentially. Now what you do is you load up your Thousand Sons with Warp Flamers. Warp Flamers that ignore cover because they're flamer weapons, and which dole out quite a lot of shots. I think it's like die 3 or die 6 hits per shot. with a warp flamer. So that's what you do. If you've got a unit of 1,000 Suns, all of which are equipped with warp flamers, they can take down those hordes quite easily.
That's beautiful.
It's good, isn't it? It's good, isn't it? So as I say, they're frightening. Yes, they are frightening, but I can see counters to them with every army. Oh, Iron Warriors. Iron Warriors do really well against them because the Iron Warriors Legion trait is that they ignore cover.
Mm-hmm.
They ignore the benefits of cover for shooting. So Iron Warriors armies, yeah, they do really well against the Tyranids.
I've heard that the Imperial Guard is going to do... Depending on how you play the Imperial Guard, you're either going to do really well or really badly.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Because they're both horde armies, in a way. They're both horde armies, depending on how you want to play them. But the ordnance of the Imperial Guard is gonna really ravage the Tyranids.
Yeah.
And the massed firepower, the massed sort of low-key firepower, it's gonna absolutely shred the likes of Gaunts and Termagants.
But then... But then you're going to go up against the big things, and the big things that's going to do all the real damage.
That's, as the Imperial Guard, that's what you really want to look out for. Carnifexes are going to be really good against the Imperial Guard. Carnifexes are going to be amazing. I wouldn't necessarily bother with Gene Stealers against them. Gene Stealers would be quite wasted against the Imperial Guard because they just don't have the elite heavy armor units that you want to take out. They just don't, and they're not very good against tanks, you know? Gene Stealers wouldn't be good against tanks, and they wouldn't necessarily, if you take enough Imperial Guard, they wouldn't necessarily be that good against them either.
Okay.
It's really the likes of Tyranid Warriors and Carnifexes, Lictors, that kind of thing that you want against Imperial Guard. Stuff that can disrupt them early on.
Yeah.
That can sort of disrupt their battle lines and come in behind the scenes. That's what you want. Otherwise, they're just going to blat you from afar, and they're going to do it well.
The term blat has never been more appropriate than it has been right now when talking about the Tyranids versus the Imperial Guard.
No. Actually, you know what? Any fight between those two armies is going to be bloody.
Yeah. That's what you want.
It's going to be like massed casualties on each side. It's going to be like any fight between the Imperial Space Marines and the Chaos Space Marines. It's because they're so evenly matched in almost, in different ways. They have different emphases, but it's going to be really, really bloody. And I love that. I love the fact that you have that now.
Yeah, the armies are armies again. They're not... I don't even know what the term would be. Reasons to sell things to people.
Exactly, which is what they used to be.
Yeah.
But there's also, one of the things I really love about this codex, beyond anything else, is what they've done with the background. Again, they've moved the Tyranids on quite significantly. What they've emphasized in this is that the sort of classic hive fleets, the first ones that were encountered by Inquisitor Cryptman, the one who named the Tyranids when they first attacked the world of Tyran.
Oh yeah, I know Cryptman well. My second favourite Inquisitor.
He's ace, isn't he? And he's also outcast, isn't he? Now
he is, yeah.
He's still out there. He's still out there, and he's still fighting against the Tyranids, and he still comes to the Imperium's aid, even though the Imperium has basically said "sod off" to him. Sod off or we'll kill you, essentially. And you know what? I mean, the reason they exiled him is actually quite interesting. For the Imperium, he basically committed a genocide that even the Imperium balked at.
Yeah.
In order to sort of stop, I can't remember what hive fleet it was, but it was one of the latter day, I think it was Leviathan, wasn't it? It was one of the latter day hive fleets. He essentially instituted a genocide of all of the Imperial worlds that were on the outer edge of the Imperium. Mm-hmm. So that when the Tyranids encountered it, they would have no biomass to feed from.
Yeah. And then they would get tired and sleepy and not be able to get any further.
You know what the worst of it was? It worked.
Yeah.
It actually did work. The Imperium turned on him for it and exiled him. He's excommunicate now as a result of that action, which, from the Inquisition, little bit of hypocrisy going on there, I think. But it worked. And as a result, Leviathan is now scattered. It's not coherent anymore.
I like to think it's purely because he did it in such a way that the Imperium couldn't cover up.
Yeah, I think that's more likely. I think it's more likely that rather than the fact of the genocide.
Yeah, because let's face it, the Inquisition has Exterminatus and will throw Exterminatus around quite happily.
Absolutely, it's part of their philosophy, isn't it? The individual human life does not matter.
Yeah,
That's and they scale that up as well. The individual world doesn't matter. The individual system doesn't matter. What matters is the endurance of humanity.
Yeah, the Imperium as a whole.
Exactly. And also, if you want to get conspiratorial about it, their own influence, their own power base.
Are you saying that the Imperium of Man is not the good guys?
Yeah. But what they've emphasized is that because of the actions of characters like Cryptman, the classic hive fleet, so Behemoth, Kraken, and Leviathan, still exist in the Imperium, but they're not quite as coherent as they used to be. They were basically shattered when they came up against the likes of the Ultramarines, the Cryptman and his allies, and so on and so forth. They were basically shattered. So there are now tendrils of them that are worming their way all throughout the Imperium, and which are seeding themselves on worlds and growing into other hive fleets or adaptations of the original hive fleet. So now you have all of these nascent hive fleets, all of which are slightly different, growing up within the bounds of the Imperium, which is a problem. And also Leviathan is still the biggest. I mean, despite being not as coherent as it used to be, Leviathan is like it's basically the Black Legion or the Ultramarines of the Tyranids. Leviathan is the Tyranid hive fleet. It's the prime fleet. It's the most adaptable. It's the biggest. It's the one that learns the fastest. And it's cool. the one that has the most tendrils. You know how the hive fleets are sort of scattered into tendrils? It's the one that has the most. But now you have all of these other ones as well. You have Ouroboros and Tiamat and Kronos and Gorgon, loads of different little hive fleets that have their own characters, that have their own modus operandi, which you can actually make from the Tyranid Codex. You can actually create these fleets very easily, and they all have their own color schemes and their own backgrounds. Like one of them, I think it's which one is it? One of them is dedicated to Kronos. Kronos is dedicated. It's the Tyranid response to chaos.
Oh, it's the Chaos Killer, is it? Yes.
Yeah. Kronos is specifically designed or adapted to fighting warp entities and for tackling the sorceries of chaos. So it has like one of the strongest shadows in the warp. The whole point of it is that it deadens the influence of the warp and prevents demons from breaking through, and also severs the connection of chaos champions and sorcerers to their gods.
I love the idea of something evolving in a manner of speaking that removes your god from you.
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's because it works on this weird, super metaphysical level that doesn't make a huge amount of sense.
No, I mean, the background is great. One of the reasons they adapted, by all accounts, is because they've encountered, since the eruption of the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Tyranids have encountered lots of chaos creatures, and they can't consume them. They can't consume demons, obviously, because their matter is ethereal. And if they try, then it corrupts them. It transforms them into something else, obviously.
Right.
The same is true of Chaos Champions. They're of Chaos Space Marines and whatnot. Their matter is so saturated by the stuff of the warp that it corrupts them. So they annihilate them. They're interested in annihilating chaos. It's anathema to them. In the same way that the shadow in the warp is anathema to chaos, chaos is anathema to the shadow in the warp, and to the biological ambitions of the Tyranids. It means that they can't control the biological matter that they consume. So it's
awesome.
Yeah, it's all-out annihilation. There is even a story here of a hive fleet from Kronos, like, hurtling towards this massed Imperial line in the middle of space and not attacking it. They go past it, they bypass it, and attack the Chaos fleets behind it.
That's fantastic.
They are basically Chaos assassins. They are specifically designed to hunt for the creatures of chaos and not consume them, but destroy them.
So the rest of the hive fleets can move in and do all that.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
It is very cool, isn't it? And all of them have these great new bits of background. My favourite in terms of the colour scheme is Tiamat. Tiamat has like this wonderful sort of pale ivory and turquoise colour scheme that's really gorgeous. And also their background is fantastic. They're a hive fleet that doesn't move. They're focused around a single system and planet called Xiaphoria.
Mm-hmm.
And on Xiaphoria, there is this gigantic biological construct that has never been encountered before. The Imperium doesn't know what it is, the Tau don't know what it is, the Eldar don't know what it is, but Tiamat protects it.
Right.
Their whole purpose is to protect it.
So this is the Norn Queen, then, isn't it?
It's probably the Norn Queen. Yeah, by all accounts, it's gigantic. It's like a cathedral. This biological construct, and it does have the effect of calling other hive fleets to it.
Yeah, it's a Norn Queen. Oh, that's cool.
There you are. That's what Tiamat are designed to do. They don't move very far. They only spread out to either eliminate threats or to consume more biological matter, and then they return. So they're more classically a hive.
Yeah, they're hunter-gatherers.
Exactly. They're not like they're more like a bee or wasp hive.
Yeah.
Rather than being nomadic. You know, the vast majority of the Tyranid fleets are obviously nomadic. They float through space in their big ships, their big biological vessels. But yeah, there's loads of them, and it's great. It's really, really cool. They've gone out of their way to expand the background. I mean, one of my favourite bits refers back to the Battle of Baal that occurred towards the end of 7th Ed.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, Leviathan fell upon Baal, the home of the Blood Angels, and more or less annihilated the chapter. There aren't many of the Blood Angels left, and it's only because Roboot turned up with a force of Primaris Marines derived from Sanguinius's blood that the Tyranids were driven off. So what I sincerely hope. Yeah, I know, man. I mean, what I sincerely hope when the Blood Angels Codex comes out is that they've carried that over.
Yeah.
So they should technically, because what Roboot did was to replenish the chapter. Is he gave them loads of Primaris Marines.
Okay.
So, hopefully, the Blood Angels will maybe have more Primaris Marines than any other chapter.
That would be an interesting one, especially if the way the army list works and the story as it goes forward reflects that.
Yeah, I mean, I really like that. I love the fact that they had the balls to nearly annihilate one of the prime chapters.
Yeah, that's something else. I'm
really
shocked
cool,
by that, to be honest.
Yeah. They're quite explicit about it. There are not many. It's not just the Blood Angels either. It's their successor chapters as well. They all came to Baal to defend it.
So the Blood Drinkers, the Flesh Tearers, they've all been...
Even the Knights of Blood, who are a renegade chapter.
Okay.
Yeah, even the Knights of Blood came to defend it, and they were almost annihilated by all accounts. The Knights of Blood basically sold themselves fighting the Tyranids and keeping them back.
Wow.
Which is really cool, yeah?
Yeah.
Really, really cool.
The wayward son comes home to do good.
Exactly, yeah. So there's a nice redemptive arc for them there. Apparently, were it not for the fury of the Flesh Tearers, then they would have been annihilated.
That makes me so happy that not only did the Flesh Tearers get remembered, that they've also turned up and done some good.
Yeah, they're not just like the more negative aspect of the Blood Angels anymore.
Yeah.
It's only because of their fury that they actually survived. And Dante was almost killed as well. He fought with the Swarm Lord.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and was almost killed by it. And were it not for Gilman coming back, then he probably would have been.
Right.
It's very cool, and I'm hoping all of these story threads tie into the up-and-coming Blood Angels Codex. I really do.
They should do. I don't see a reason why they wouldn't.
Well, the fact that they've made a point of it in the Tyranid Codex kind of suggests that it will. And also, you've got a similar thing going on with the Dark Angels, of course. I mean, the Dark Angels have moved on as well, significantly, because they're going to be coming out very soon, too. You've got Luther. We had it revealed that the prisoner in the center of the rock was Luther, the original traitor and father of the fallen angels, and he was released from the rock during the War for Fenris.
Released, stolen,
stolen, spirited away.
Yeah.
Who knows? So maybe there'll be a little bit more there. We know that Cypher is at large, and the fallen angels. I mean, he was imprisoned on Earth by Gilman at one point, and then absconded again. He's basically, you cannot imprison him.
No.
So the worst thing you can do with Cypher is put him in a cell somewhere, because he'll get out. Doesn't matter where he is, he's going to get out. Whatever force, whatever power favours him, it spirits him away. So just don't bother.
I think it's just those tiny little watchers in the dark. I think it
wouldn't surprise me, because I don't think it's one of the Chaos Gods.
No.
I really don't. It's too subtle somehow. I don't think it's one of the Chaos powers. It's something else. It's some other power at work.
Imagine,
behind Cypher,
if you will, some point they have a bit where one of the little watchers of the dark just turns up and it goes to the Dark Angels, to the Fallen, and says, "And now I introduce myself." He takes down his robe, takes off his helmet, and it's a tiny little frogman.
Oh, good God. Oh,
how amazing would that be?
Yeah, it would be really cool. Like little power-armoured Slann.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be ace. That would be ace.
That'd be so cool.
The Dark Angels are essentially the tools of the Slann.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be cool.
How much would that mess with everybody?
That would mess with everything,
the Dark Angels being the super knight-based Imperial Gothic chapter, and then they're being bandied around by frogmen. Just insane. But you've also got like the very precarious position of the Dark Angels in the new Imperium. Yes,
because some of their actions in the War of Fenris and the Gathering Storm very questionable. I mean, they nearly bombarded Fenris out of existence and nearly killed the Space Wolves. They went very near Cadia when it blew up. And from what we understand, the rock is just floating around now. And we're not quite sure what they're doing. So I'd be very, very interested to know what Azrael and his chapter are doing right now. Like what their place in the new Imperium is. Have they met with Gilman yet? And what was his reaction to them? Because he doesn't like the Dark Angels.
I'm hoping that his reaction was screaming intensifies.
Oh, you know what the other thing is as well? He knows.
He does, yes.
Because he's met Cypher.
Yeah.
So he knows something anyway. Maybe Cypher obviously wouldn't have explained everything to him, but he knows that there are renegade Dark Angels out there. So, you know, and also there are other characters that kind of know now. There are clearly the Changeling knows, and the forces of Zeech, they clearly know. The Crimson Slaughter, they know. Cranon the Relentless and the Crimson Slaughter, who I actually, you know what? People really railed against them when they came out. I really like them.
I think they're cool.
I really like them, and I really loved the Codex when it came out for 7th Ed.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a really good Chaos Codex, and not only that, it gave Chaos something new. You know, it showed you how a renegade chapter falls rather than the old traitor legions. You know?
Yeah.
And it was a good story. It wasn't what I would have expected from a renegade chapter. It wasn't like, oh, they fell because of hubris or because of pride or whatever. They fall because they're doing the right thing.
Which is always the worst thing in the world for.
Absolutely, yeah, and also the Dark Angels have a hand in that too, which is why the Crimson Slaughter hate them so much.
Oh right.
Yeah. In part of what causes the Crimson Slaughter to fall is that they're fighting alongside the Dark Angels against this massive space Hulk that's come out of the Eye of Terror.
Mm-hmm.
And the Dark Angels, they find a Dark Angels interrogator chaplain being very unpleasant to some of the Imperial prisoners inside, and the reason being that they believe that they know something about the Fallen. And the Crimson Slaughter call them up on it. They actually call them up on it, and the Dark Angels don't answer them and skedaddle, and this causes some massive tension between them. It's to the point whereby the Crimson Slaughter draw bolters on them.
Okay.
And tell them to stop, you know. And since then, there's been something of an enmity between them.
Yeah. That's
and the fact that
very
Cranon,
cool.
Cranon, the Relentless, the chapter master of the Crimson Slaughter, or rather the Chaos Lord of the Crimson Slaughter, knows about the Dark Angels and the Fallen Angels. That's interesting.
That's very interesting. It brings up a whole heap of questions. And
it does, doesn't it? I mean, what could he do with that knowledge?
Yeah.
If he could bleed that into the ear of Gilman.
Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? Is he going to try and do that? Is he going to try and find a way to to get a message to Gilliman to sort of say,
Yeah.
well, your little space marines that you've spent so much time with, look at this. Look at this.
They're no better than us.
Yeah.
They're no better than us.
I really like that as a story hook.
I do too. I think it's great. I love the fact that more people know now.
Yes.
And also the wolves. I mean, the way the wolves are treated by the Dark Angels in the War for Fenris, that's going to have emphasised that enmity to the nth degree.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they already don't get on. But also there's the other thing as well.
The Space Wolves don't get on with anyone. That's kind of their thing. Yeah.
That's their thing, isn't it? But also the Space Wolves are in a precarious position as well, because now the Inquisition and the Dark Angels know about the Wolfen.
Oh, really?
Yup. That's one of the reasons why they were going to bombard them out of existence. They thought they were tainted.
That's very cool.
They know about the Wolfen. So now...
I wonder if the first Primarch we'll see back will be Lehman then.
It could.
The first,
it could be.
Yeah, the first loyalist Primarch, I should say.
Yeah, the next one, it could very well be. And also, they could. I hope they do it. I hope they make the Space Wolves like excommunicate.
Yeah.
I hope they make them like the renegade, non-renegade chapter.
Yeah, that
functions on its own, you know, but is hunted and harassed by the Inquisition and by the Dark Angels and whatnot. I think that would be fantastic.
What would you do with Fenris then? Because if you had the chapter being hunted, you wouldn't be able to keep them all on Fenris unless Fenris became a fortified city-state.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe Fenris, because the Imperium is stretched so thin.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll be able to stay on Fenris. Maybe they could fortify it and stand against both the Imperium and Chaos. If there's any legion that I imagine could probably do that, it's probably the Space Wolves.
Oh yeah, the Space Wolves. That being the Mary Sues. Actually, no, the Ultramarines are the Mary Sues, aren't they? But
the Ultramarines are the Mary Sues, but the Space Wolves aren't far off.
No, the Space Wolves have a tendency of being the Space Vikings. They have a tendency of surviving everything.
Mind you, that said, that's going to be difficult because Fenris was left almost destroyed.
It was, wasn't it?
In the aftermath of the Wrath. I mean, Magnus literally split part of it in half.
Yeah.
You know, he turned whole continents to lava and almost destroyed the Fang. You know, he almost managed to bring it down. So, we'll have to see.
I love Magnus. I just want to put that out there.
I do too. Next to Fulgrim and Lorgar, probably my favourite Primarch.
So ever since he's come back, he's just been awesome.
He has, and what I really like is they haven't had him be like, oh, vengeance, vengeance, vengeance. If you look in the Wrath of Magnus books, it takes pains to point out what he's doing is it's almost like a play. It's like a theatre for the Chaos powers, because of course the warp responds to poetry. It responds to irony and to emotion. So it's the dramatic vengeance that he's trying to orchestrate in order to stir the warp, to create a spell that will drag Sorciarius out of the warp and into the material universe. That's what he was trying to do. He actually doesn't care that much about the Space Wolves anymore. His vision is too far-reaching. He's too abstruse now.
Yeah.
He's an immortal, you know, he doesn't give a shit anymore. The only thing he cares about really is the irony of it. It's the way he can use it in a very physical and real manner to practice magic.
Which is always the one thing and the only thing that he's always wanted.
And he wins.
Yeah.
He does win because, of course, he manages to drag Sorciarius out of the warp and into the material universe, and now it's a part of the material universe that's unpassable. The silver spires, the 9 silver spires that he brought to bear on Fenris, are now in a ring around Fenris, around Sorciarius, and are projecting out this psychic disruption that can't be pierced. Nothing can get through it. So now Sorciarius is its own bastion of chaos in the material universe.
Go on, Magnus.
Yeah.
Go on, my son.
I don't know where Magnus is at the moment, because the last we saw of him, he fought against Gilman, nearly killed him, but because of the interference of the Sisters of Silence, boo, it's the only way you can actually fight Magnus, because he's so powerful. You know, the other Primarchs can't stand up against him. They need the Sisters of Silence to bring him down to their level. He was hurled into the webway. He was hurled into an unstable warp gate into the webway, so
Do you know what would be really interesting? If he came out of that after a bit of a communion with the laughing god.
Oh God, that would be very interesting indeed.
Because that would be very much pertinent to Magnus's aims and goals.
Well, to his character, yeah. Maybe he finds something in the webway, because it's a realm of secrets, of ancient secrets of the Eldar Empire. Maybe he finds the Black Library or something and becomes even more powerful. Sure. Who knows?
Dear God.
Ahriman's in there too.
Oh, yes, he is. Aye.
Ahriman's in the webway too, chasing after Thousand Sons who were restored to their living states by Inead.
Yep.
That's very interesting. That lends Ahriman a bit more of a dynamic now.
It gives him a very... What I'd like them to do with Ahriman is play this up as, how did you do this when I keep failing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the idea of all this time and effort that he's put into trying to restore the Thousand Sons, and then it be just being done off the cuff by an alien.
By an alien god, Inead, and it is off the cuff. Inead just sort of like, I can restore life as well as take it, and just like waves its hand. Yeah. And suddenly these Rubricae that are with Ahriman start to twitch, and they pull off their helmets, and they're Thousand Sons, they're alive. It's mental. It's absolutely mental, the fact that there are living Thousand Sons. I mean, if for my money, I don't think they'll do it, but I would love to see like small units of living Thousand Sons in the Thousand Sons Codex.
I was just about to ask, are there rules for that, or is it?
No, it's just background. Yeah. It's just background. But I would love to see it. I would love to see that.
That would be
and are they the same? I mean, they've experienced a lot. Mm-hmm. Those Thousand Sons, they've been dead, they've been reduced to dust, they've been trapped in their armor for centuries. They can't be the same creatures as when they were originally alive.
No, that's physically impossible, isn't it?
Yeah,
the experience will have shaped them too much.
Do they still suffer from the flesh curse?
Oh, now there's a good question.
I can't imagine Inead wiped that from them.
No, because that's not life or death, is it?
It's not. That's actually just a matter of their flesh. It's a curse of their flesh. So they could very easily start spontaneously erupting with eye stalks and crab legs and all sorts of weirdness.
That would be cool, actually. Thousand Son mutates.
Yeah, that would be ace.
Yeah, I like that as an idea.
That would be a very nice way of bulking out the Thousand Sons army list, actually.
It would, where you just get a...
the flesh cursed.
To be honest with you, if you just got like a little box set that was just full of mutations, and you can just
full
add
of
them.
Bits. Yeah, just full of bits. Yeah,
add them
Chaos Spawn bits. Just give you like Thousand Sons box set, Chaos Spawn bits.
Yeah, there you go.
And just do that. Yeah, it's really cool. I like that idea. Or maybe they'll go the other way. Maybe Inead has maybe somehow that has been reversed, and they are pure Thousand Sons now, which could potentially be even worse. Who knows?
That's true, actually. Yes.
It could potentially be even worse, I mean, it's something I've always wanted them to do, but which I don't think they will, because it's like the secrets of the Dark Angels. It's part of their background. I would love to know more about the Blood Ravens.
Yes.
Because they are so sons of Magnus. They are so derived from Magnus's gene stock in every which way, shape, and form. They just don't say it, I mean, they are fascinated by arcane knowledge. They seek out like occult wisdom all over the place. Higher propensity of psychers than any other chapter. Even their imagery is derived from the Corvidae, which was Ahriman's cult of the original Thousand Sons. So they are so sons of Magnus and just haven't been told it. It's been kept from them.
I like the idea of your progenitor being kept secret.
Yeah.
That's quite cool.
I mean, what if they found out?
Yeah, would it cause a self-destruction within the chapter? Would they
Would they go renegade?
Yeah.
Would they go seeking out Sorciarius to chat with Daddy?
Yeah. Or
Who
would
knows,
they go the completely other way and try to destroy all trace and purge their own history? Yeah.
Maybe they would become more Puritan. Maybe they would go the other way. They would look back at the history of the Thousand Sons, see how they failed, and then become more puritanical, more like maybe the Black Templars, who hate witches and psychers and whatnot. That'd be an interesting twist.
Yeah.
I would rather like that. Or maybe they will go down the route of trying to harness their powers, trying to control their powers in a more with more equanimity than the Thousand Sons did.
There's a whole heap of ideas of what you could do with that.
They really are. I really, alongside the Relictors, who are basically as Chaos Space Marine as you can get while still being Imperial, I really like the Blood Ravens.
Yeah, they're one of those chapters that just sits there on the outskirts. And
they're just on the edge. It wouldn't take much for them to fall. It would take very little. In fact, there are equivalent renegade chapters in the Chaos Space Marine Codex who are very like them, like the Scourged, for example. The Scourged are a Zechian renegade chapter who again fell for ideals. They fell through their idealism. They were created by the Inquisition, and they were designed to go and get basically to suppress heresy. But their chapter master really lamented having to murder innocents. He hated it, and it was driving him slowly mad, and he called out to whoever to allow him to hear the truth, to hear the minds of men, so that he could tell who was innocent and who was not. And what happened was Zeech heard, obviously, and granted the whole chapter overnight the ability to hear every lie ever spoken by humanity.
That's amazing.
And that filled their minds with this just chattering, contradictory insanity, and they went rogue overnight.
Yeah.
And became the Scourged.
That is awesome. It's love
brilliant,
that.
Isn't it? Isn't it great? I mean, a lot of people really don't like the Renegade chapters. I love them.
The amount of history and story that you can get out of them is beautiful.
It's great, and they provide brilliant templates for what you can do with your army's background and with their iconography and their imagery. It's just wonderful. I love it, and I really want to see what started to happen towards the end of 7th Ed, when we started to actually get codices for renegades like the Crimson Slaughter. I want to see that. I would give my eye teeth to see a Codex Renegades supplement.
Well, as I think that 40k is going to do the same kind of thing that AOS is doing, wherein it'll be a yearly update rather than a whole new game every 4 years. I think there is a very strong chance that is going to happen.
Well, given the rate that they're hurtling out the codices, we're going to have a codex for every single army early next year. It will be like sort of midway next year will be the cutoff point. So at that point, they're going to have to start introducing all of these unusual, abstruse armies to keep it ticking over,
Yeah, just keep pushing the story forward for various places as well.
Absolutely. So I wouldn't be at all surprised. First of all, we're obviously going to get army lists based around the different Primarchs when they come out. So there's going to be a World Eaters Codex, definitely. There's going to be an Emperor's Children Codex, definitely. There's going to be an updated Space Wolves and Dark Angels Codex when those Primarchs come out. There's going to be that, definitely. But I would not be at all surprised to start seeing some really quite abstruse army lists, like, for example, the Inari.
Yeah.
There is definitely going to be a Codex Inari at some point.
Which will
probably what it will be is a midway point between the Dark Eldar, the Drukhari, and the Craftworld Codex.
Yeah.
That's what it'll be, and it will incorporate the Harlequins as well. But I wouldn't, or I would not be surprised to see Exodites.
Oh, I think Exodites is a very much a strong bet.
I think so.
In the same way that I'm fairly sure that we're going to see. Sorry, I've just had a cat jump onto my... Gimli, I do believe that you want to be on this podcast, don't you? So, what codex do you think is going to come out, Gimli? No, he doesn't want to talk about it now.
No.
He's suddenly gone shy. Completely derailed my train of thought there, Gimli.
Yeah.
I think what we'll end up seeing is just once all the big ones are out. So, Space Marines, Tyranids, Chaos Space Marines, Traitor Legions, obviously.
The core codexes.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. The core codices. Once those are all out, we'll start seeing really interesting stuff coming out. I firmly believe we'll see a Katachan Jungle Fighters Imperial Guard Codex.
I think so, yeah.
I'm firmly we'll see the scattered remains of Cadia will get a codex.
Yes. I think it's entirely likely that we'll see a Black Legion codex or like a Black Crusade codex.
Yeah, I think so too. I think what I want to see happen is I want to see, once we get to the middle of next year, when we get all the core codexes out, I'm hoping they're going to slow down a little bit.
Yes.
Because once all that's out, they can just take the time, do stuff. It can come out as and when going forward, because there is just too much coming at the moment.
There's so much, and it is actually getting rather difficult to keep up with it.
It is. It's due to some personal circumstances, I've not been able to afford to buy much for about 8 months now, 8-9 months, and because of that, I am now so far behind in what I want to be getting. I still don't have Shadows of Hammerhal, for example, which is something I desperately want, and I still don't have it. And then, of course, Necromunda happened.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Necromunda on the next episode, I think.
I think that's a good idea. Haven't we also got Space Hulk as well?
Yes, there's a Space Hulk, new version of Space Hulk with new miniatures coming out.
Yeah, incorporating the Gene Stealer cults.
Yes. Because have you seen anything of the latest White Dwarf yet?
I haven't yet, no.
Let's just say that's a very nice Christmas present.
Actually, yes, I've asked my parents to get me that for Christmas.
No, I just mean the White Dwarf.
Oh, just the White Dwarf.
The White Dwarf is a nice Christmas present. Oh, God.
Oh, cool.
What game do you play? Here you go. Holy God. So, yeah, I still don't have Shadespire, and I really want Shadespire because I ended up having to being able to play it last week, and it is brilliant.
It's a good game, yeah?
It's a very good game. I have one issue with it, and that is it's over too fast.
Oh, well, that's a good thing, though, in its own peculiar way, isn't it? You want more? Yeah,
I do. I think if I play it, I'm going to have a house rule of it's going to be 5 turns, not 3.
Not 3, yeah.
Just purely so the game goes on for a bit longer and there's a bit more going on.
Just for your own personal fun.
Yeah, it very much is. It's just because you kind of get warmed up in turn 1, you start doing everything in turn 2, and then turn 3, it's the final the final move. So it's like, I want a bit more than this. I really want to get into the Path to Glory stuff.
Yeah, me too. Love the Path to Glory.
Yep.
Throwback to ROC days.
Yep, completely and utterly. Carriage on Overlords is something I still haven't managed to get hold of yet. I've got the book, I just don't have any of the minis, and I really do want to collect the Carriage on Overlords army.
Those airships.
Yeah, oh god, airships and steampunk dwarves. I mean,
gorgeous.
once again, someone put a hole in my head and had to look in to see what I like.
Yep.
You know, there is all this stuff happening. That's not even getting into the 40k stuff. The fact I haven't got the new 40k.
There's so much. There's so much.
I need it to slow down for a little while, I can.
Keeps building and hurtling along.
Yeah,
there's so much stuff.
And I do think we need to talk about Necromunda next month.
I think so too.
Mostly because I think this Necromunda might be Games Workshop's first big misstep.
Really interesting. Yeah. Interesting.
But we'll save that because we're way past an hour now, so I think
we're running out of
yeah.
Yes, we've waffled on for long enough.
So next episode we're going to get into Necromunda. I'll do a little bit of housekeeping, which is you may have noticed that the releases for the Fluffenhammer have become a little bit erratic, and that is purely down to the fact I have started a new job. My job has gone from working 2 nights a week to 3 nights a week to 5 nights a week. Purely because over the last month I keep getting promoted, which is a really weird experience. It's like, what am I doing here, and who's been paying you off? So because of that, what me and George have been doing is we're recording on a Saturday morning.
Yep.
That makes it difficult to get in guests.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at how we're going to do that. It should be something that we're going to be able to get back to doing, because it is something I really want to do.
Yeah.
And so hopefully that'll start getting going in the new year. So what we're going to do from here until the end of the year is we're basically going to be doing these little shows where we're just going. I say little. He says little at the time.
These 2-hour podcasts.
Is we're just going to be getting together and doing these free-form shows, which I hope that you guys are enjoying. If you are, please let us know. If you're not, then please, once again, let us know.
Absolutely, let us know. I mean, I'm enjoying doing them, I must say.
Oh, yeah, I love doing this. And I'll always find a way of doing it. It's just working it out.
Yeah.
So with all that being said, that's where we stand at the moment. When we get into the new year, I'm hoping to have a complete plan of how we're going to do this and evolve the Fluffenhammer a little bit. Part of that evolution will involve a Patreon. Because we want to add a second show to this. Because we're both goddamn idiots and we need serious psychiatric evaluation.
That's a given. If anyone's ever read my fiction, you should know that.
Yes. So that's where we stand at the moment. So thank you for sort of sticking with us as we're going through this little bit and we're trying to work out what we're doing next.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you to everyone who listens to this podcast.
Very much so.
It's very gratifying. Very gratifying to know that people are enjoying it.
And the people are, because the Fluffenhammer group just keeps on growing. We're getting guys coming in that neither of us have any connection to, either personally or through the old oil house sites, and this makes me happy. It makes me feel that we're doing something right, and
we must be getting we're catching some sort of hook in the air, aren't we? Yeah, definitely.
Which makes me really happy, and it makes me happy that you guys are enjoying it. So, all that being said, we're going to talk about Necromunda next time, and I think we'll probably be able to get maybe 2 more shows in before the end of the year.
I think that's very realistic. I think that sounds good.
And with that, I'm going to look at trying to do an end-of-year roundup show.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is going to be, if you're on the Facebook group, in the next week or so, there's going to be a thread going up. That thread is going to be voting and talking about the bests, the worsts, the most out there, the safest choices. It's going to be a load of categories. And I want you guys to tell us your answers. And with that, that's going to be our end-of-year show. It's going to be entirely built by you.
That sounds great.
We'll also talk about stuff that we like and dislike and whatnot. But
definitely.
First and foremost, I want this to be you guys talking about what you thought were the best, the worst, and all that of the year. So that'll be up in the next couple of... probably going up on Monday or so. By which time you'll have already heard this episode. So I'll shut up. God damn it, Zentian time. It confuses me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Non-linear.
That's the problem with podcasting, actually, because I've just realised that as we record this, that's going to go up, and this episode will go up about a week after that's already gone up, so that'll be confusing. Ouch. So, with all that being said, we're going to get out of there. First of all, George, where can people find you if they are so inclined to be converted to the dark paths?
And you will be, I guarantee you. You can find my work at www.strangeplaygrounds.com. You can find me hanging around on the Twitter feed Enigmatic Elegy, and also the Born in Blood Twitter feed now, too. Has its own Twitter feed.
Excellent.
And also on the YouTube channel Exaggerated Elegy.
Spot on. You can find me and my work on YouTube at Gruff Nexus Audio. You can find also my Riveted Sounds project, which has now just kicked up another gear. We have just released a podcast full of 10 to 15 minute short fiction. In order to make sure that the launch was a good one, you'll find that there are 20 episodes up to start with. So there is plenty for people to get into. We're going to have a load of guest readers. Hopefully George will be involved in that as well.
Absolutely. I'm happily involved.
And I'm really happy because I've got a guy called Tom Adams who is a very interesting author. He's going to be doing a couple of bits as well. And that is going to be awesome. At the moment, that's pretty much it. Riveted Sounds is taking up a big chunk of my time, and the full-time job is... eating everything else. There is also The Creeks. That is on a little bit of a hiatus at the moment.
I like The Creeks.
Well, hopefully... There's 2 episodes yet to drop, and we're not entirely sure how we're going to do it going forward. Definitely want to keep it going. Just don't know, because, as I say, I'm working 5 nights a week.
Yeah, it's problematic, difficult, yeah.
It is. It really is. So I don't know how we're going to do it yet. But there will be ways and means. Even if it has to go monthly, it'll go monthly. And at the moment, that's everything else that I'm doing. So check out YouTube, just search Grufflock. Check out Riveted Sounds at rivetedsounds.co.uk, and check out The Creeks at thecreeks.weebly.com. And with that...
Fabulous stuff.
Thank you very much, George.
My absolute pleasure, as always, sir.
And thank you very much to the listeners at home. And thank you, me. Good night, guys.
Bye-bye. Oh, fab. That's... I don't know, but it depends on where people are listening to.